friend. I am Vitaly Portnikov. On Palm Sunday, the Russians launched a missile strike on the center of Sumy. Dozens killed, dozens injured. The number of victims may unfortunately increase because the Russians specifically targeted residential areas precisely when, on a holiday, the largest number of people might be in the city center. First and foremost, of course, our sincere condolences to the relatives of the deceased, the injured residents of Sumy, and, of course, we must realize that the Russians now do not even hide that. They are carrying out their terror on residential areas. When there was a similar strike on Kryvyi Rih, they couldn't even find anything near the epicenter of their attack, even any kind of object. That could be called military. And then they calmly said that they were not targeting the playground, but the restaurant where military personnel were allegedly gathering, and which, from this perspective, is a legitimate target for a missile strike by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And the fact that nothing happened to the restaurant at all and no meetings were obviously held there did not stop this Russian lie. I am sure that even now we will hear false messages from the Kremlin. After all, now, when Washington continues negotiations with Moscow against the backdrop of these thieving attacks, Putin can be sure that no one considers him, no one and nothing stops him in the terror against the peaceful population of Ukraine. It may seem to us that this terror has no obvious logic, but this is only from the perspective of people who do not understand the intentions of the terrorist state. Believe me, genigum terror always has logic. No one carries out terrorist actions against the civilian population unless it aligns with the plans of the Kremlin, the plans of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and Putin's perception of reality. An important goal of such attacks is to intimidate the civilian population of Ukraine, to remind Ukrainians that only capitulation can stop the missile strikes on their land. No army will protect them because an army can hold back Russian troops and prevent them from occupying new Ukrainian lands, but no one can hold back missile strikes, and they will continue until the moment Kyiv realizes the importance of eliminating Ukrainian statehood and annexing its lands to Russia. The second goal is destabilization, the sentiments within Ukrainian society itself, so that those who understand the necessity of resistance clash with those who say it doesn't matter what flag flies over my house, as long as the missile strikes stop. I can remind people who truly believe that agreements with the Kremlin are worth something about the fate of all previous agreements, and about what happened to those who negotiated peace with Moscow. I recall an episode from a novel by an African writer who told about the conflict in her native country. When the troops of one of the sides which had previously blockaded their enemies managed to occupy their territory, promising to feed those who had neither bread nor water for many weeks, just for a single slogan: we will live in a united country. And when people shouting this slogan came out of their shelters, they were, of course, simply shot, along with the children, to clear the territory for the loyal population. And believe me, this is the fate that the president of the Russian Federation has chosen for the Ukrainian people. He considers Ukrainians to be a disloyal population that needs to be expelled from their native land so they can make way for the loyal population. Do not believe those who tell you that Russians and Ukrainians are almost like one people, that they have a shared history and similar language, as recently blasphemously stated by Russian opposition figure Vladimir Kara-Murza to French parliamentarians. No. The history of coexistence between Russians and Ukrainians. This is a very short period in their national coexistence. And during that time, Russians also used Ukrainians to increase their imperial weight and fought against them every day when Ukrainians tried to assert their own national identity. Nothing has changed since the times of the Pereyaslav Council, since the times of Baturin and Cheherin, since the times of Shevchenko's exile. Nothing in the attitude of Russians towards Ukrainians has changed. And I just sincerely wish for everyone never to have to realize this and never to come face to face with a Russian soldier, with the Russian FSB, with Russian propaganda, with all that evil that has been ruling the Russian state and its people for centuries, convinced that any price can be paid for a few kilometers of foreign land. Yes, Russia has lived, lives, and will live. And our task is not to fall into it, a trap. And therefore, of course, we must also realize Putin's military technical goal. He may realize that he is not capable of occupying all of Ukraine, but he wishes, firstly, to have the ability to occupy more territories in Ukrainian regions where it will be possible to hold fake referendums so that he can then demand the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from these territories and the Sumy region. This is one of the obvious candidates for the Kremlin for creating such a fiction. Therefore, the bombing of Sumy could be preparation for such a Russian offensive. And if the Kremlin realizes that the offensive is also futile, they might consider it necessary to create a large buffer zone between those territories, controlled by the Russians, both on the sovereign territory of Russia itself and on the occupied Ukrainian lands, and free Ukraine. To facilitate the task for those discussing options for dividing Ukrainian territory into different zones of control between various armies. This could also be a goal of Putin, which he, by the way, will cold-bloodedly present to the American participants in the negotiations. After all, if negotiations are underway, it means that any misanthropic proposals can be put forward, justifying them as a quick path to peace. So as I already said, terror. It makes sense. And our task is to understand this logic, even when it seems that nothing remains but emotions and hatred. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, and follow my social media. Victory and peace to you.